early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq.
After the events of 2003, Iraq has gone through many phases.
Mohammed Shia al-Sudani,
Nouri al-Maliki, Haider al-Abadi.
And in all of them, corruption was everywhere. From the so-called leaders that led Iraq into a brick wall to the average politician. Scandals have come up and died down, but most of them were shown to the world after many years of corruption. But this one scandal is different than any other scandal. It's different because it's completely legal. Now yes, $2.5 billion was stolen from the government, but it was done in a way where it became untouchable. And the person behind this so-called heist of the century was named Nour Zuhair Jassim. And in this video, we are going to uncover the truth of a heist that is completely legal and was done in a way that only is seen in movies. Alright, so a lot of companies have come to Iraq to do certain contracts. These contracts could be like oil,
third largest crude reserves with 115 billion barrels,
building, and so much more. There's a contract for almost anything you can imagine, but you might not know what a contract is. Well, you might, but let me just tell you it anyway. Alright, so let's just say that the Iraqi government wants to build a road for $300,000, and they publicly say that they want to build this road. Someone has a company that builds roads, goes to the Iraqi government, and tells them, I can build this road for $200,000. And then another company comes in and says, no, we can build a road for $150,000. And so now Iraq has to pick which one is the cheapest and best option. And whichever one they choose, they give a contract to them. So far so good, the company has a contract with the government to build the road. But the thing is, before they can even start building the road, they have to pay 3% of how much the contract is worth to the tax commission. Well, why do they have to pay 3%? You see, the 3% serves as a protection to Iraq. And when the contract is done, Iraq excludes the tax that the company has to pay from the 3%. And the rest goes back to the company. There's a problem. The process of excluding the tax and evaluating the job is very long. It's long because the tax commission has to see how much taxes the company has to pay, which takes around 6 months, and then they have to start evaluating the project. And this takes forever because they have to see if the project is complete or not, and if the receipts are true and legal. So the tax commission can't do all that, so they just send it to the audit chambers. And in this audit chambers, they check everything from physically to financially. And this takes about 6 months to a year. And when all of this is done, all the data goes back to the tax commission. And while the tax commission writes these companies checks to the finance ministry, which is Al Rafidin Bank. These checks are the amount of money that these companies will get back. So with me? Alright, let's continue. So this is a very long time for big foreign companies. So most of them just leaves the money there. And because of this, the account is growing rapidly and has now reached over $100 billion. Exactly how much, no one knows. And this is where Nour comes to play. But how if the money is secured by the government and the company needs to go to the audit chambers to check if everything is legitimate? How can he steal $2.5 billion? You see, coincidentally, during the time that Nour wants to take the money, the former head of Parliament's Finance Committee, Haytham al-Jubouri, sends a proposal to the government. Now in this proposal, he recommends to get rid of the audit chambers. Now why would anyone do that? He said in this proposal that the audit chambers were very lengthy, and this is ruining the relationship with the companies. Now this was coincidentally. Whether he did this from the goodness of his heart or someone sent him, no one will know. But it happened in the time that Nour wanted to take the money. So now his eyes are locked on taking the money. So now the audit chambers are gone and everything is done inside the tax commission. There's a problem. The tax commission is not going to focus on the little things. Well, because the audit chamber used to do that. And so this is the opportunity for Nour to take the money and no one will bat an eye. But how exactly did he do it? Because this isn't any ordinary robbery. He has to do it in a way where he doesn't get caught. And to do this, he needed multiple companies. 5 companies to be exact. You see, he needed 5 companies because, well, he didn't want to be suspicious. And taking $2.5 million from one company is suspicious, but taking it from 5 companies is not. But what is more suspicious is when 5 companies are under one name. And that's not what he did, because he named 2 of the companies under his name, and then the 3 other companies in another person's name. But the proceeds go back to Nour, but in the documents it's under someone else's name. But speaking of documents, these companies are shell companies. You see, shell companies are regular companies, but without any paper trail, nor significant assets. Alright, so he has the 5 shell companies, but he needs one more important thing. And if he doesn't have this thing, his whole plan will break. Now this one thing is the approval of the companies that had the contracts, that these 5 companies can take the money that they have with the government. Now whether these approvals are legal or not, no one really knows. That's because these companies didn't publicly say that they gave them these approvals, because they don't want to hurt their relationship with the Iraqi government. And so they're just staying quiet. And this was the protection that Nour thought that he had. So he continued the plan. And the plan was for the companies to go to the tax commission and say, hey, we have an approval from these companies that we can take the money that they have with you. And when they did do the check, they found that everything was legal and the project is done. So they wrote these 5 companies 247 checks to Al Rafidain Bank, totaling to $2.5 billion. And this is where the legal factor of this scandal ends, and the illegal one begins. But the question is, how can the tax commission even trust someone like Nour? See, Nour is a shark inside a sea of fish. And before he became rich, he was working under a well-known person, and a person that you might already know. That person's name is Haytham Al-Jabouri. You remember him, the guy from the beginning that sent the proposal? Nour used to work under him, and then after many hard-working days, he became the head of Haytham Al-Jabouri's office.
حلقة وصل بين السيد هيثم الجبوري بينه وبين شركات الصرافة والبنوك.
And so when he grew, he wanted more and more. So he went to a well-known city in Iraq called Al Basra. But he wasn't doing anything legal, because what he was doing was exactly the same thing that he did in 2021. You see, when someone wants to import something to Iraq, they have to pay tax, which is called import tax, which closely resembles the 3%. You pay it in advance, and then they get back the remaining amount that they paid. And so Nour would go and make fake companies under names of people that had just died. And he would go to the bank and say, hey, I paid my import tax, the shipment is going to take a long time, so can I receive my money now? And so he would take the dollars, because everything he did was legal in the government's eyes, and he would sell it to the people. And he did this for a long time and became mega rich, and became the shark in a sea of fish. And he did this for a couple of years, and he saw something called Mina Al Fao, or in English is called Al Fao Grand Port. And he saw the Korean company Daewoo building this port. But the problem with this company, they needed second-hand builders, because they can't build it themselves. And they were willing to spend millions of dollars just to build this port. And this is where Nour comes to play, because he became the gateway of all the third-party builders to start working with Daewoo. And Nour is getting money for being the door. And let me just tell you, it's a lot of money. And as you can see, he was already rich before the scandal. He didn't really need the money. He just did it because he can. And just to throw this out there, you remember Haytham Al-Jabouri? Yeah, the guy that Nour used to work under? Well, now he's waiting 2-3 hours just to see Nour. And coincidentally, during the time that Nour wants to take the money, Haytham Al-Jabouri suddenly sends the request to the government. Coincidentally. And as you can see, Nour is a veteran in this field. The field of illegal business. Alright, so now Nour is going to Al Rafidain Bank with his 5 shell companies to cash the checks. Exactly 247 checks. But Nour wants the money in cash, and that's both illegal and bad for the bank. But because Nour has a lot of people under his wing, he can do whatever he wants. And so he gets a bunch of 18-wheelers and fills it up with cash. But why cash? See, Nour wants the money in cash because, well, it's untraceable, and he can do whatever he wants with it. But he didn't take the cash all at once. It was actually done in a period of 14 months. But what he did with the money is something else. Because you see, he would take 10, maybe 15% of the total amount and invest it in Iraq. And then the other 90-85% goes to foreign countries, like Jordan, Dubai, London, and so much other countries. But here is where the laundering really showed, because most of the properties that he bought was under the names of someone else. And well, that's laundering 101. But that's not all, because the money he invested in Iraq actually ruined Iraq. You see, Nour would see half a mall being sold for $100 million, he would give them $150 million cash. And so this brought the mall prices up, and everyone wants to sell their prices very high. That's not all, he also did this with properties, and that's how he laundered his legal money so he doesn't get caught. But in 2023, in the Baghdad International Airport, while he was going to his private jet going to Istanbul, he was arrested. And now the battle between Nour and the government has begun. Now the question is, why was he arrested now if it happened in 2021? You see, the scandal became public like any other scandal. The difference is, this scandal was actually very close to when it became public, and everyone in Iraq was furious. So the government had to do something. And so they made it their mission to catch the person who did this and put them in jail. And so they captured Nour and put him in jail. But there was kind of a problem because you see, Nour was a magician and he had a lot of bunnies up his sleeve. And when he was arrested, he was interrogated. And when he was interrogated, he showed his bunnies to everyone. And when I mean bunnies, I mean big names that helped him steal this $2.5 billion. And these big names didn't want their names to be public that they helped him steal the money. And so what did they do? In about a month, they released him. But they had to do a deal so they can say, oh, look at us. And that deal is very simple. All of his assets that were in Iraq became government owned. And everything was going fine until they went on national TV. And why did they go on national TV? To say that they got the money back. But there's kind of a problem. You see, when you look at the cash, it's sitting on a table to make it look like they got more cash than they actually did. But in reality, they didn't take any cash, Nour just gave it to them. But here lies the question. Why was he released? Okay, I understand it's because of the big names, but if he's released, that means everything he did was legal. And if everything that he did was legal, why was he arrested? And the thing is, all of these questions that I'm asking, no one's gonna answer it. Do you know why? Because of one word. Corruption. And because of corruption, Nour Zuhair went back on his private jets and flew out of the country. And he became $2.5 billion richer. And we can't say a thing. Thank you for watching this video, and if you like this corruption, then you would love the Cola Wars. And if you like the video, like and subscribe. And if you stay to the end, write all caps, "The End," in the comments below. But make sure that "the" and "end" are together. Alright, well that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.